said, my name's Rob Stevens. I'm the current manager of Queensland's Varroa Mite Prevention and Preparedness Program. I've also been heavily involved with the Varroa jacobsoni response at the Port of Brisbane since it started in mid-February. And I'm also the former manager of the National Varroa Mite Eradication Program that ran in Townsville from 2016 to 2021, where we worked on 3 separate incidents of Varroa jacobsoni that were introduced via the Port of Townsville. So today I'll be discussing the surveillance currently being undertaken at the Port of Brisbane and showcasing our B123 reporting tool, as well as just going over some general Asian honeybee awareness. So we're going to have plenty of time for questions at the end, but if you do have any burning questions throughout, you can start popping them into the chat. We've got Dave Shapalius and Dean Stephen from the Varroa Mite Prevention and Preparedness Program who can answer some of the questions, and we can have a chat about them at the end also. We've also got Jo Martin here, who's the State Secretary of the Queensland Beekeeping Association, and she'll give a brief industry perspective at the end as well, and we'll have additional time for questions after that. So we'll move straight into it. We do have quite a bit to go through. I will try and move through this very quickly. If you've got any questions, so like I said, just pop them into the chat. So before we get into the Varroa jacobsoni response, I think it's timely to give a brief update of what's happening with Varroa destructor and the New South Wales situation. So hopefully all beekeepers in Queensland should have a good general awareness of Varroa destructor and the transition to management program that is currently underway. For those of you not aware, back in June 2022, Varroa destructor was detected at the Port of Newcastle by routine surveillance on sentinel beehives. The New South Wales DPI put in a gallant effort, but unfortunately Varroa destructor was deemed not technically feasible to eradicate in September of last year. And then in February of this year, the updated response plan was endorsed that included transition to management. So the main aims of the transition to management program are slowing the spread of Varroa, building industry resilience, providing education and training opportunities, and also supporting pollination security. So unfortunately, though, as of April, Varroa is on the march in New South Wales, and it is moving closer and closer to the New South Wales-Queensland border. So as yet, Varroa destructor has not been detected in Queensland, but unfortunately it is only a matter of time that it has been deemed not technically feasible in New South Wales. It will eventually get here through natural spread. So to combat that, as government, we've increased surveillance, and we're also really advocating for industry and beekeepers like yourselves to start doing surveillance on their own hives and submitting that data to our B123 system, which I'll go into a little bit later. So to keep up to date with the Varroa destructor response and transition management, we really encourage all beekeepers to sign on to our e-alert system. And you can also stay up to date on our transition to management page on the DAF website. So I'll go into a little bit more detail as the presentation goes on, but we'll show you where that data is going and how it benefits industry with some mapping tools that beekeepers can make informed decisions with. So just a visual representation of what this risk pathway looks like. All the pink dots above the Queensland border are managed hive locations in Queensland. And then the shaded areas in New South Wales are where confirmed detections have happened in that state. So just last week, we got confirmation from New South Wales that around Lennox Head, just north of Ballina, there was a detection that is approximately only 65 kilometres to Coolangatta. So it is well and truly getting closer and closer to the Queensland border. There are very limited movement restrictions in New South Wales now. Beekeepers are free to move infested hives right up to the Tweed. So there's nothing stopping New South Wales beekeepers moving intrastate in New South Wales. So it is only a matter of time before those bees naturally spread Varroa mite across the border. So this is something we'll be able to provide, and we'll talk about a bit later, is some of this industry mapping that you'll be able to utilise moving forward. So in terms of the Port of Brisbane and the active response going on right now, it started on the 19th of February 2024. A single Varroa mite was found in a sentinel beehive at the Port of Brisbane during routine inspection of sentinel hives, much like what happened in New South Wales at the Port of Newcastle. On the 26th of February, though, diagnostic testing confirmed that the species was Varroa jacobsoni and not Varroa destructor. So this is not linked to the mites from New South Wales. This is a new incursion. So we immediately increased enhanced surveillance activities on managed hives and unmanaged or feral European honeybees in and around the Port of Brisbane. And to date, all of those have returned negative results for Varroa. So that's a positive. We think we've caught this really early, but we've still got a lot of work to do before we can wrap this one up. So hopefully everyone does have a good awareness of Varroa mites through what's going on in New South Wales. What not everyone's aware of, though, is that Asian honeybees are actually the natural host of Varroa, and there are 2 distinct species of Varroa mite worldwide. So you've got Varroa destructor, which is obviously the big bad. That's the one that's got the devastating impact on European honeybees all over the world, including recently in New South Wales, where it arrived in June of 2022. So the other variety is Varroa jacobsoni. So that doesn't usually breed on European honeybee or Apis mellifera, but it has been known to host shift from Asian honeybees to European honeybees. This has taken place in Papua New Guinea, Fiji, and the Solomon Islands. So Varroa is also present in other countries where it hasn't host shifted. So it's present in PNG, Torres Strait, Fiji, Vanuatu, and the Solomons at this stage. So what's Biosecurity Queensland doing about it? We've conducted extensive testing since the detection at the Port of Brisbane. To date, all our testing has confirmed that no exotic viruses have been detected at the port, and there's no additional exotic bee pests as well. So we're still working on tracing to see where the mites might have arrived from, but we can confirm this is a new introduction through the Port of Brisbane. Unfortunately, we might never know exactly what the pathway was. The Port of Brisbane is a very busy port. We don't have a clear point of entry. So the assumption at the moment is that it's come from PNG, Fiji, Vanuatu, or the Solomons. So we've obviously continued heightened surveillance with both our federal counterparts at the Commonwealth Department of Ag and Fisheries, and also working alongside industry. So this is the first of many times tonight I really want to acknowledge the support we've had from the Queensland Beekeeping Association and volunteer beekeepers who have been embedded in the response since early February, and their support has been vital to get us to where we are today. So one thing we have been doing is that exotic bee surveillance in and around the port, and that's helping us to confirm what that likely point of entrance might have been. So just to show you visually what that looks like, all the effort that is going on at the Port of Brisbane right now. The map on the right-hand side shows all the extensive surveillance that we've been doing around the area. I guess the take-home thing to highlight for beekeepers is all the blue triangles on the map. That's where we've actively conducted surveillance on managed beehives belonging to Queensland beekeepers, and they have all returned negative results. So we're confident that the mite hasn't transferred host to European honeybees, and it isn't moving through Queensland beekeepers' hives at present. So the map on the left shows where some of the effort has been going on Fisherman Island, and where we've been really trying to find these unmanaged beehives and potential new introductions through the port. So to date, we have found 15 separate feral colonies of honeybees on Fisherman's Island. And again, I want to really acknowledge the support we've had from the Queensland Beekeeping Association and volunteer beekeepers. They are an integral part in tracking down these colonies in the first few weeks of the response. So we found those first 14 mainly in February and early March. Now, importantly, one of those 15 was an Asian honeybee nest. So that was located on the 6th of March, and that nest was destroyed, removed, and sampled for testing. So genetic testing has returned, and it's indicated that these Asian honeybees are not related to the population found in Cairns or any other previous detection of Asian honeybees in Queensland or Australia before. So this colony of bees, we have also confirmed did contain Varroa jacobsoni, and we confirmed 37 mites were found in the nest and the brood comb. So something some people might not realise is there's actually 9 different species of honeybees found throughout the world. So to start with, you've got your giant honeybees and your dwarf honeybees, 2 of each type that are external nesters. They are found worldwide. And then you've got 5 different species of cavity nesting honeybees or medium-sized honeybees. So at the top end of the spectrum is our Apis mellifera, or our European honeybee that we know and love. And at the smallest end of the cavity nesting scale is the Apis cerana, or Asian honeybee. So that's the one we're looking for in this instance. So when you see the bees side by side, it seems fairly obvious that they are different species. But if you are coming across individual bees out in the field, it's not so obvious, and it does require sampling and an entomologist to confirm species. Looking at them side by side, you can see the Apis cerana, or the Asian honeybee, on the left. It's got a much darker head. It's got much more uniform striping, less hairy thorax and abdomen. It's got more of a pointy abdomen or pointed bum, and the flight is a little bit more erratic, whereas your European honeybee, or Apis mellifera, on the right-hand side is a little bit more golden in colour. It's got more of a graduated striping and more dark towards the end of the abdomen. And you can see in that photo, there's definitely a lot more hair on the European honeybee. It tends to fly a little bit slower, and it spends more time foraging on individual flowers. So unfortunately, Asian honeybee is endemic to Queensland. This isn't something that's new to us. Asian honeybee was discovered in Cairns in 2007. An eradication program was mounted. Unfortunately, by 2011, it was deemed not technically feasible to eradicate up in the Cairns area, and the Asian honeybee transition to management program ceased over 10 years ago in 2013. So since that time, we have had regular interceptions at ports throughout Queensland, and more often than not, these Asian honeybees do contain mites, but they are picked up early by the Commonwealth at the point of entry, where the risk is mitigated. So the map on the left shows the current known infested area of Asian honeybees in North Queensland, or far North Queensland. It goes from Daintree in the north down to Cardwell in the south, and it goes west to Dimbula. So you see that geographical area sort of mirrors your wet tropics. This is where these bees really thrive, and this is their natural environment. They are a tropical species of bee. We have no doubt that the Asian bees will survive in more dry tropic areas and more temperate environments. I think the jury is definitely out to see how Asian honeybees would deal with a southeast Queensland winter. They definitely will not enjoy it, but I suspect they would definitely survive a winter down in southeast Queensland. But that wet tropical environment is where the Asian honeybees have really found their footprint. So that's in over 16 years. That's the extent of Asian honeybee spread through far north Queensland. So like I said, they have been here for over 16 years. That means that Biosecurity Queensland has got good at doing surveillance on them. So we've got several techniques we use for what we call presence-absence testing to prove that we do have presence of Asian honeybees in a particular area. Those include floral sweep netting, aerial pheromone trapping, and rainbow beater collection. So I'll go into a little bit of detail on each of those different surveillance methodologies for you. So the first one is what we call floral sweeping or beelining. So that just involves looking at flowering resources, finding bees, and then trying to convert them to an artificial feed station. And that involves just sugar syrup mixed with other lures. So for Asian honeybees, we find stuff like coconut essence works really well. For European bees, they like things like lemongrass and lavender and those kinds of things. So you can see this is an example of a feed station we set up at Townsville. You've got European bees all over that feed station, but you've also got Asian honeybees that are foraging side by side with the European honeybees. So again, you think it's really obvious, the Asian bees, but they are smaller, but they are very hard to detect until you get your eye in for them. So the whole beelining, I won't bore you with all the detail on beelining, but it is a very interesting process. The more bees you find out there on floral resources, the easier it is. If you can get bees on multiple floral resources and getting a bearing of what direction they're flying, you can triangulate the position of where you think the nest is. So if you want to take that to the extreme, once we've got target species on a feed station, we can put paint on the abdomen, and we can actually start setting a stopwatch and timing how long it takes for the bees to leave leave the feed station and then return. So it's not an exact science, but from our history in Cairns and Townsville, research sort of suggests that for each minute of flight for Apis cerana, the colony is roughly 100 metres away. So if the flight time is 3 minutes, you would think that the colony is probably within 300 metres of that floral resource. So obviously, beelining and feed stations, floral sweep netting, that targets the female bee, the worker bee. What we use to find the male bee is called aerial pheromone trapping or ballooning. So that involves using an artificial queen mandibular pheromone that we put on a little lure, and then we put a bit of glue on the fishing line, and then it's basically just that. It's a bit of reverse fishing. So if you put the balloons up in what we deem a drone congregation area or a likely drone congregation area at the right time of day, under the right weather conditions, if there are Asian honeybees breeding in the area, the drone should be attracted to that pheromone. So that picture was actually taken up in Cairns. You wouldn't be expecting to see that many drones in this early in an incursion here in Townsville. Here in Brisbane. So you can see the photo in the corner. The drones are a little bit darker. They're not as obvious to ID as the difference between a European honeybee drone and a European worker. It's a little bit more subtle, the difference with the Asian honeybee. So aerial pheromone trapping isn't a technique that's going to find you a colony by itself. It is what we call presence-absence testing. It's going to alert you to the fact that you've got presence of bees in a given area. So this was a really useful tool that we used in 2016 and 2019 incursions here in Townsville, where I'm located. It helped us narrow down the search area. So if you see the map on the left-hand side, all the green markers are areas where we had a positive detection for aerial pheromone trapping, and all the yellow and orange are the negatives that we had in the respective programs. So usually you would assume that if you find a drone, it would have flown a maximum of about a kilometre from a nest to a drone congregation area. So what we found in Townsville, though, was that we never got a positive on a ballooning that was more than 500 metres away from an Asian honeybee colony that we found. So again, it helps you refine that search area and helps dictate where to put resources. That if you get a detection with your ballooning, you know that you've got a colony probably within 500 metres to 1 kilometre. Now, another system that's been around for quite a while is rainbow bee eaters. There's a bit of a love-hate relationship. Most beekeepers don't really like the rainbow bee eater. They're a really pretty bird, but they do focus on eating bees. You see in the photo, that's the old way we used to do things. We used to put sheets under roosting sites, and then we would collect all those pellets, and then we would have to analyse those pellets individually with an entomologist to assess what those bees have been eating. So it's not the droppings, it's actually a regurgitation. They regurgitate the parts of the insects that they can't digest, and that includes the wings of the bees. So we can actually look at the wings, rehydrate them, and look at the venation, the veins on the wing, and we can identify what species of bee those bee eaters have been eating. So again, this was a really valuable tool in the Townsville responses, and we really refined it. Instead of using sheets, we started using vacuum cleaners because that's how many collection sites we found. So we did over 4,500 collections throughout the 2019 program. We had over 3,000 collections throughout the 2016 program. So in the 5 years, we collected over 227,000 pellets, and our poor entomologist individually ID'd nearly 1.5 million EHB, European honeybee wings. So that's not the impressive number, though. The impressive numbers are 79. So we found 79 Asian honeybee wings, and that led to 2 new detections of Asian honeybees at the Port of Townsville. So that directly led us to finding 2 new incursions of bees, is that early intervention and that early detection of wings. So just to give you a real world scenario, how all these things can be brought together, like I said, none of these surveillances are going to go find you a nest straight away, but when you use them in collaboration with each other, you can narrow down your search area. So this was an example of how we found the 2019 detection at the Port of Townsville. It all started with that yellow dot on the left-hand side, routine surveillance, collecting some rainbow bee eater pellets. We found 3 Asian honeybee wings. That alerted us that we had a problem, that we had presence of Asian honeybees in the Port of Townsville. At that stage, your search area is quite wide because birds can fly a decent distance. So At that point, our search area was the entire port of Townsville. We immediately sent resources in, started doing aerial pheromone trapping, and over 3 days, we got 12 drones. So that narrowed down our search area, that we were fairly confident that that Asian honeybee nest should have been within a kilometre of those drone collection points. And then we had to be a little bit patient. We weren't finding any foragers immediately, but within a few days, a palm tree started flowering at the back of the port office, and then we started getting foraging bees, and we converted them to artificial sugar syrup, and we started beelining. So you can see the orange lines on that map, that quadrant. We knew they were flying roughly in that 90-degree sort of vector, that they were flying in that direction. And then we started marking the bees, and we started timing their flights. So we started recording that it was anywhere between 3 and 5 minutes for the bees to return. So we were pretty confident that the bees were somewhere in that vector up to 500 metres away. So that's where we directed all our boots on the ground, and we found that colony within a couple of days. So again, it all comes together when used in unison. These things won't find you the colony straight away, but it will help you refine that search area, and that's what we've been doing in the Port of Brisbane. So Asian honeybees are prolific little swarmers. They do reproductively swarm all year round in far north Queensland. It's yet to be seen how that would occur in southeast Queensland. In far north Queensland, they do reproductively swarm all year round. They are very prone to absconding too. If they are disturbed, they won't defend their nest. They will cut and run. They will abandon their nest and they'll swarm. So these are some of the weird and wonderful places we've found colonies of Asian honeybees near the ports up north. They are very good hitchhiker pests. They do attach themselves to pallets. They get in machinery, break bulk on cargo ships. They hide in vehicles as well. So they are very good at staying out of trouble, and you might not realise they're there. The colony size is significantly smaller than European honeybees. Your average bottom box for European honeybees would probably contain 30 to 40,000 bees. A large Asian honeybee colony would not exceed 10,000 bees. So they are much smaller colonies that you're dealing with. So as a precautionary measure, while we're still establishing the risk that's present at the Port of Brisbane, we have put a movement control order in place. So that does mean that beekeepers that are in the area subject to the movement control area cannot move bees or beekeeping equipment into the zone, within the zone, or out of the zone. And they all are also obligated to notify Biosecurity Queensland immediately if the presence of Varroa mite, and if they reasonably expect that they might have presence of Varroa mite. It's also important that this is backdated to 90 days prior to the movement control order coming into place. So if any beekeepers had bees in that period, 90 days before the 26th of February, it's important that they report those bees to us, and that we can ensure that these bees haven't leapfrogged out of that zone of interest. So it's also important to let us know if you bought or sold any bees in that area in that 90-day period as well. So I'm thinking a lot of people here today are probably inside this movement control order zone, or the zone subject to the movement control order. There is quite an extensive list of port-based suburbs. We did take a very precautionary approach, and we have included all suburbs that part of the suburb is within 10 kilometres of our Sentinel hives at the Port of Brisbane. And that movement control order is in place for 90 days, which will take it up to 26th of May, if I'm not mistaken. So again, just to reiterate what that means for you as beekeepers, you're not to move equipment into that zone, out of the zone, or within the zone. We are encouraging beekeepers in the zone to test their hives, though. We're not saying people can't tamper with their own hives, they can't crack them open. In fact, we're encouraging it. We want beekeepers to be managing their hives. What we don't want is beekeepers to be moving equipment between locations. So if you're a recreational beekeeper within the zone and those bees are in your own backyard, there should be little to no restrictions in place for you. You can still work those bees, and you can ensure that those bees aren't swarming. I think we're nearly towards the end of swarm season now. I think it's definitely cooling off. We are still seeing a lot of drone activity in our ballooning out at the port, but you would expect that the reproductive phase for European honeybees is coming to an end very shortly. But we do actively encourage people inside that MCO area to be managing their bees. So just a few things as well. If that MCO is giving anyone particular hardship, you can apply for a biosecurity instrument permit, and we can do a individual case assessment to see if there is a way to mitigate the risk and if any movement is required. Just a few exclusions from the MCO. It doesn't include processed honey. So you're free to move your honey around that you have extracted. If you have extracted it at that site, you can sell your honey, you can move it around. Beekeepers shouldn't be collecting swarms inside that area. They should be reporting it to Biosecurity Queensland on 132523. We don't want beekeepers collecting those swarms for themselves. So if you are in that zone, you might well receive a phone call from Biosecurity Queensland, and we're trying to actively do more surveillance in that area, where that might involve sticky mat testing and miticide strips. So we're really encouraging beekeepers in that zone, though, to perform their own testing and submit it through B123, which we'll go into shortly. And this citizen science is really essential for us moving forward. It is a very large area that we're trying to cover, and we need beekeepers to be proactive, and we need them to be checking their own hives in the zone. So at the moment, we've had about 28 submissions from beekeepers inside the area subject to the movement control area. That number's all right, but we'd like to see far more than that. We think there is a substantially larger number of registered beekeepers inside those suburbs subject to the MCO, and we would like to see that beekeepers are performing that testing and reporting their results to us. So more broadly, though, we are in the middle of a testing campaign at the moment that we're promoting, what we're calling our summer-autumn testing blitz as part of the Varroa mite prevention preparedness program. But also, since this detection at the Port of Brisbane, it has really heightened the need for beekeepers to go out there and start testing their hives. So since the 1st of February, we've had 345 submissions to the B123 system, where Queensland beekeepers have tested over 2,600 hives, which is really positive. And just briefly on that graph, you can see the majority of beekeepers are doing the appropriate kind of testing as well. So most beekeepers are doing an alcohol wash as opposed to a sugar shake. I should highlight that the month of April is actually it is the second annual month-long bee testing blitz nationally. So during April, all Australian beekeepers are encouraged to inspect their hives for high-priority pests such as Varroa and Tropicolaps, and they should be reporting that to their respective jurisdictions. In Queensland, that is via the B123 system. So I'll try and move this along. We are really trying to make this mean something for Queensland beekeepers, that you've got access to this data. So we want to be able to provide mapping to Queensland beekeepers to show them where we've got good levels of negative surveillance. And unfortunately, when Varroa does start to move through Queensland, we will have heat mapping that will be very similar to what you might have seen in New South Wales, where you will see where positive detections have been made and beekeepers can make informed decisions on where they want to move their hives. So at the moment, we are in our user acceptance testing phase of getting this mapping embedded in our transition to management website on the DAF website, I should say. That is hopeful to be live in the next couple of weeks, and definitely in May, you'll have access to what we're calling cool mapping. That's going to show you the density of negative surveillance, and then we're already actively planning for heat mapping when the inevitable does happen and we start getting Varroa destructor come from New South Wales. So all Queensland beekeepers have a general biosecurity obligation. You should be registered. You should be using the RBE, the Registered Biosecurity Entity portal, to keep your details up to date. It's important that all beekeepers maintain up-to-date movement records, and you should be conducting regular hive testing. You should be testing your hives a minimum of every 16 weeks. That's at least 3 times a year. And you should be reporting those results online using the B123 form. If you want to stay up to date what's happening nationally, go to our DAF website. We'll put the links into the chat so you can access these, and you can also subscribe to our e-alert newsletter that will keep you up to date with what's happening with the transition to management, and we'll put that into the chat as well. So I do want to briefly go over just how simple B123 entry is. It's only 3 very simple pages of data entry. The first one is just what date you checked your hive, and then what type of beekeeper you are. Are you a commercial beekeeper? Are you recreational? And then putting your HIN number in. If you don't know your HIN number, can't remember it, it's not a required field, but if you do know your HIN, you should be putting that in for us. So purpose of your surveillance, most people here today, it's going to be a hive health check. This system is valid though for interstate movement, so people are using doing required testing to move interstate under a permit. They can use B123 and enter the data that way. And also all beekeepers should have a barrier system in place that if they're collecting feral honeybee colonies outside of the movement control order, you should be at the very least completing an alcohol wash, and we would like you to submit that negative result to B123. So the next stage of the report is the detail. So it's just a live lookup for entering your address. You can also drop a pin, and you can actually move the pin after you've used the address function as well. So really essential that if you are reporting, we need to know the location of where the surveillance took place. The next field is mainly for our friends up in far north Queensland. We do have beekeepers that regularly remove Asian honeybee colonies, and we're really advocating that anyone that kills an Asian honeybee colony should do an alcohol wash of it, and we can get negative data to support that the bees that have been there since 2007 still originate from one incursion. They do not contain Varroa mite. So I should have mentioned that earlier. Or the endemic population of Asian honeybees in North Queensland does not have Varroa jacobsoni, and this helps us support that. So really important that you are recording how many hives you've got at the site you've tested and how many hives of those you did check. You should be recording your method of examination. That is a multi-field, so most people should be doing an alcohol wash, but if it's warmer months and you've got opportunistic chance to check drone uncapping, you should be doing that as well. So you should be doing an alcohol wash and a drone uncap. You can tick both those boxes. So majority of people are going to tick no, that they haven't found any mite at this location. But if you do click yes, you will automatically be given information on what to do. And that's to call the call center on 132523. And there's also information there on what to do to preserve your sample. So that's going to be really important if you do find anything suspect. And the final page is basically just your contact details, so your name and contact. So that's fairly self-explanatory. Now, your data is secure. We are only using this for our own internal purposes. Those mapping that I showed you before, that is going to use whole localities. So it will be heavily de-identified, and we will not be sharing any information that goes through B123 with anyone outside of the department. When you complete the form, you will be emailed a copy of your submission. You can use that, like I said, for interstate movement applications and permits. You can use that for interstate if you need to prove to a pollination contractor that you've done required testing. And we'd be recommending anyone that's selling a hive, they should be testing their hive before they have a change of ownership. And that's a really good way to show the person you're selling the hive that you've checked it and that it's safe. So really important, we really need all beekeepers to join the fight on this one. We need you to be checking your hives at least 3 times a year, and we need the data to go into B123. And like I said, this is going to help you as a beekeeping industry, that beekeepers can make informed decisions and they can choose where to move their bees based on the most up-to-date information at the time. So just really quickly, now that we're all experts on Asian honeybees, just want to show you the 2 species of honeybees side by side on the same floral resource. Again, when you see them side by side, it does seem fairly obvious, but it's very easy to misidentify them. I'll just give you a second to decide which one's Asian honeybee and which one's European honeybee. And hopefully everyone said that European honeybee is the one on the left and Asian honeybee is the one on the right. Now, something else I do like to point out, if you see that brown lump on the thorax of the bee on the right, a lot of people assume that is a Varroa mite. It is not. That is just part of the bee. It's a scutellum. We quite often get people seeing Asian honeybees up in Cairns and they assume that there is mite. But yeah, that isn't usually the place you're going to find the mite on a bee. You definitely will. But they will quite often be on the underbelly of the abdomen that the mites will be, and you're not going to see them visually. If you can see mites on a bee, it's already far too late and you've got a very, very heavy infestation. So just pointing that out, that is not a mite on the Asian honeybee on the right-hand side. Yeah, we're only a phone call away. Our team is available if anyone does have any concerns moving forward.